Hello everyone and welcome to this panel discussion at its time on the fashion industry and mostly focusing on sustainable fashion. So today we are joined with an absolute number of fantastic experts in their field across the fashion industry, and we're going to be touching on things about sustainable fashion, what the hurdles are that the industry needs to overcome in order to be an ally for the planet, and what we think the future of this industry really looks like. So before we jump into any of that, I'm Rose. I am a climate activist and I am also a social media manager for Ecologi. So I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of background as to who they are. So Basma, if you'd like to go first.
I knew it was coming to me first. I can see myself up at the top. My name is Bess Mcleifer. I have been a fashion stylist for about 12 years now, but I'm also a filmmaker. I make documentaries, I host, I'm on the radio, I write articles about fashion or about social politics, and I'm also the host of It's Time that's going to happen in a couple of weeks. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. And Sara Gillespie, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sara. I am Senior Brand and Partnerships Manager at Tala, which is a sustainable style brand which launched in May 2019.
Fantastic, lovely. And then Amy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amy Cherry Hughes. I am one of the co-authors of Your Planet Needs You, which has just been released last month. And I have been working in the fashion industry for 12 years. I've been working in press and also fashion styling, but more e-commerce styling.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Safia, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Safia Minney. I'm a social entrepreneur, advisor, author and executive coach. I'm probably best known for founding People Tree, which is a pioneer in sustainable fashion, and more recently Real Sustainability, which is a not-for-profit organisation that curates information on sustainable living and sustainable leadership and how to transition to net zero. Thanks very much.
That's wonderful, that's wonderful. And Eva, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Eva. I work for a Swedish outdoor brand called Houdini Sportswear, where I've been working for many years, actually. Yes.
Lovely. All right, thank you. And Sara, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Sara Simmons. I'm an impact expert and a global leader in living consciously. I've been in the fashion industry for 20 years. I have been a fashion buyer for international stores, including Harvey Nichols, and I've been a pioneer of building conscious brands. And my key real heart skill that I love, I talk a lot about hero products and product innovation, because I believe that's the cornerstone of how we can make real change in the industry.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. All right, so those are all our panelists for today. Such an incredible lineup. I can't wait to dive into everything. So first up, I thought it would be good to just basically lay out onto the table. Let's talk about definitions, because there are a few definitions out there which sometimes get a bit muddled up. So Safia, I'd like to ask you, what is the difference between sustainable fashion, fair trade, and ethical fashion?
Thanks, good question. So I think firstly, ethical fashion actually is doing what we should be doing anyway. So it's producing fashion that has been made with respect to people in terms of paying them a minimum wage. Unfortunately, only 1% of workers receive a living wage. That should be our goal. That should be our aim and objective. But also ensuring that there aren't any practices of modern slavery, which include excessive overtime, the banning of unions and workplace representation, enforced labour, child labour, bonded labour, and human trafficking that often feeds workers into garment factories. So I think what we're trying to do here is to look at what best practice should look like, and that would be a much more regenerative fashion approach, which would look at fair trade, and that would be taking the production of a product and saying, how can we add the most value, the most income to the farmer of the fibre, whether that's organic cotton or linen or hemp or whatever it might be, through the different stages of manufacture. So that would be through ginning, through fabric creation, which could be hand weaving. It could also be machine made. So looking at the manufacturing side, but ensuring that people are paid fairly, and that work and livelihoods are being promoted in rural areas, often through craft skills. So we need to find a way. At the moment, probably about 2%, if that, is spent on labour in the FOB price of a product. I'm sure Sarah would know. But what we need to do is we need to increase that proportion of the FOB price to about a third. And I think that Fair Trade has proven that's possible. So the maximum number of people can benefit when you buy a product for new, because a product new, because of course we know that we've got 10 years worth of fashion in our closets today, so we don't actually need to be buying new. We can buy secondhand, but the point is, if we're going to buy new, we should be buying with sustainably fair trade produced materials and fibres, some circular economy of course as well, and then making sure that we're paying workers decent living wages in order to produce what they make.
Wonderful. Oh, so insightful. I feel like we could just dive into that so much more. But I'll go on to my next question. So it's well researched and it's very common knowledge that the fashion industry has a huge impact on the planet. It's disastrous. Safia, I'd like to come to you once more and just say, why is it that this industry has such an enormous impact on the planet, and how did we get here?
Well, basically, the economic system that we're using is totally dysfunctional, and most people of 30 years ago and more who've studied economics and realised that the emperor has no clothes on, that the externalities are not included in any of our business costings, whether that's human rights or it's the natural now scarce resources that we're using to produce clothing. I think in the True Cost movie, which was viewed by millions of both fashion company people and individuals, that was really well highlighted. So you could see the true costs of everything from leather production to fast fashion, even luxury production, and the costs associated with both planet and human rights. So what we have is a dysfunctional system. What we're doing, I think, here in the festival is we're looking at new economic paradigms. We're looking at what would, if you like, Kate Raworth's donut economics model look like if we look at it in the context of the fashion industry. That the donut, really, the limited natural resources that we have available to us, and in the middle, the human rights, the basic needs that we have of the 7.7 billion people on our planet. How do we feed, shelter, educate, and look after the healthcare, etc., etc. But there's a huge question there, isn't there, in terms of the dysfunction of an economy that just prioritizes profit before everything else. So we are redesigning the economic system. So it goes much further than just fashion, I believe.
Of course, no, completely. It's a whole change that our whole world needs to do very, very quickly. Fantastic, thank you so much for that. And so, Sara, I'd like to ask you, what can businesses do? So say you work in fashion or you're in charge of a fashion brand, what are the kind of things that they can start to do to make sure that their supply chain is sustainable as possible?
The beginning of answering this question is, we've come to a point in time, we don't need more at all, as Safia says. What we need is meaning from what we buy. And that's really what consumers are craving right now. The thing about, as Safia was saying, about businesses really putting profit first, this for me was my turning point in my career, because I started my career as a fashion buyer for Harvey Nichols. I was there for 7 years, and I went there because I wanted to make impact, and I thought I was doing that for many years. But it was around 2006, I started to see the onset of fast luxury, and I was like, this isn't right. It's just another thing, pushing products, seasons increasing, quality going down. And I didn't know it then. I just felt something wasn't right. And I knew it was the key thing that businesses need to do is innovate, not push product out there, like, pushing on the psychology of a customer. Buy more, buy more. You're not good enough unless you have the next trend that's almost the same as the last season trend. Buy it again. This felt for me just so wrong, and like I wasn't making impact. So I set out to innovate. And I started at the raw material end of things. And I believe this is where the real opportunity is, like Tala are doing, like Girlfriend Collective are doing. People want different, they want innovative, and they want to buy. They just don't want the same thing. And as Safia says, new is the way forward to help everybody in the supply chain. But to do new with meaning, to do it from a conscious point of view, to create hero products, to actually innovate. So what I did in creating a conscious brand, I actually broke down a pair of jeans and I made it from the ground up sustainable. So I used organic cotton, fair trade cotton, natural indigo dyeing, hand loom weaving, carbon offset, and timeless designs. Now, I was an individual entrepreneur, not a massive corporation. And I was like, something needs to change. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to break down a product and innovate it. And I was able to do it and successfully. So if I'm able to do it, big companies are able to do it. And that is what the customer wants. So the first step in the process of what businesses can do in their supply chain is innovation from the raw material to create something genuinely new. Like, I've had a direct-to-consumer business for the last 3 years, and I've been selling the world's top conscious brands to the world's top clients. And you know what they were saying to me? I don't need another jacket. I have 20, or I don't need another pair of jeans. But people still love shopping, and shopping is amazing. Like, consumerism is amazing. It's a great thing of our time. Now is the opportunity to make it conscious. And that's actually from what the consumers want, but also, and it's what the companies can deliver. And that's where you can actually start to make real money, because the consumers want different and the companies can innovate. And it can be better for the supply chain, and you can make more money through the whole chain doing that. So that's my first point. And the second point of how the industry can change is to go limited edition and made to not like operate in a different way. Because another problem is waste in the industry, making too much. I mean, hearing stories like Burberry, what they're doing with their clothes, they're burning clothes. What's that about? That's the most craziest thing I ever heard. So what you can do for the industry point of view, it's got to really be reshaped. And limited edition, I believe, is the answer, and direct to consumer. Both, and I teach this in my impact coaching program. It's for anyone at any level can do this, can apply this system to their business model. So from niche brands to global corporations, you need to think about how you deliver your products in a totally new way to the customer, which is basically the customer doesn't want so much of the same thing. They want something truly innovative. So that means, the way to make somebody buy something is to make it limited. So if it's innovative and limited, you're increasing the need, the want, the desire to buy. If you're just like, hi, I've got 5,000 of this thing, do you want it? Why should someone buy it now? Now, if it's innovative and it's limited, you're pushing them to buy. So that for me is the secret of how you can really, really innovate right now as a company. Yeah.
That's great. No, that is fantastic.
To add to Sarah's point, I think we probably were in the fashion industry at the same time when I worked at all the luxury magazines. And the thing about it is you get to spring, summer, and by the time you're on spring, summer, you're thinking of autumn, winter. And it's almost like, I remember being, whether it was Harper's Bazaar or Vogue or InStyle, whatever magazine I worked at. And it was like, oh, are you carrying last season's bag? Or are you going to get this season's bag? And I was like, I just bought it. Like, I don't want to go buy another season's bag. I just want to use the bag I just bought. So it's almost also changing the psychology of the fashion industry, which is that you're not current if you're not current.
Yeah.
And that psychology and that way of speaking has to change.
Absolutely. I also think the fashion industry needs to be less lazy, in the sense of like, you've got to do the work, guys. You've got to innovate. You've got to make new design. Don't push it on the customer that they've just invested £500 in a handbag, £1,000 in a handbag. No, you're not cool anymore because it's not you bought it 6 months ago. That's disgusting. It's like, make it limited from the beginning. Design, so that you're actually giving customers more freshness, so the company takes the liability at the beginning to do their job properly.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh, that was absolutely fantastic. All right. Talking more about, let's talk actually, because you were speaking about like high fashion, you know, have you got this Burberry bag, or where's your Birkin bag, or oh, you're wearing last season's, da 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 da, all that kind of stuff that we've been told over the years and years. I want to bring into like events, like high fashion events, like we saw with the Green Carpet Fashion Awards in October. I think for anyone who hasn't seen it, watching at home, please pause this and go give it a quick Google, because it was an event in and of itself. But Basma, I'd like to come to you actually just to quickly touch on, and also anyone chime in at any point, please. But do you think we'll start to see more events like the Green Carpet Fashion Awards?
To be honest, I don't know that we need events to make a change. I don't think it's, because my issue with events is they are a purpose and then they're done and then they're like, okay, let's move on and go and shop in H&M or wherever we're shopping. I think that this needs to be a long-term thing. So if the event is about educating people, just like It's Time is doing, then great. I think I'm all for it. But I think these high-end events where it's like it's a fashion awards, which is actually, having been part of a lot of fashion awards, it's a lot of money that goes into those awards, which could probably go to better things. I don't know that an event is the right way to make change unless the event is through educating. I think brands like the ladies that we have now, like, that are making change, but it's not necessarily like this huge change that's going to change over the entire world, but those small increments are more important than one-off fashion awards or fashion carpet where you have to get dressed up and you have to actually overpopulate in order to make a voice, if you know what I mean.
I
would
I also think it's about people who can actually use social media for good, impact personalities, so that it's about not just, as Basma is saying, it's not just a one-off event. It's about really building this into a lifestyle, building it into something everybody wants to be part of. So there's a rise of the impact influencer, and that's someone who is like really buying consciously, living consciously, and sending the story out there consciously that can reach thousands and millions of people across the world. That for me is what I think is, it's making it more like social, like a thing, like a big thing to live in a conscious way and buy fashion in a conscious way.
I think to pick up on that point, you know, when Kim Kardashian says, you know, oh, yes, you know, climate crisis is real, you know, broken heart. And then, you know, jumps on the next private jet plane to one of the many houses, to one of the many closets, to many, you know, that you know, what I think what we're doing is we're starting to, you know, to kind of pull apart the lack of authenticity, the kind of the inconsistency in value systems, because I was delighted when I saw that she was acknowledging that we have a climate crisis, and that it's you know, it is more than heartbreaking, right? But what it does is it starts to engage her followers to say, oh, okay, Kim, well, you know, what are you doing then about that? Are we transitioning to a plant-based diet here? Are we, you know, are we giving up a few of our houses to not take long haul flights, or not quite as many each month as you do pre-COVID or whatever? You know, so I think it is about, you know, really engaging and questioning the influencers' integrity and consistency, which I think is well overdue.
I think so too. Sarah, you were going to chime in on that point about events.
Yeah, as a brand, we're invited to attend quite a lot of these events now, in terms of the sort of like more sustainable fashion shows that are cropping up, which I think is great as a sort of startup where we haven't used a lot of paid marketing in order to get the brand out there and reach new audiences. It's really nice to be invited to be part of these shows and kind of increase awareness of sustainable brands. I guess my point was going to be that where events do exist to support brands like that, I think it's really positive. And I would hope that as consumers start to demand more from brands and that sustainability starts to become the norm, we will have to see events that are currently in place changing in order to adapt to suit what the customer wants. I was thinking about the Victoria's Secret show as an example of this, where obviously not for sustainability reasons, but for a kind of like a changing viewpoint in society, they've had to kind of reassess what they're actually putting out there when it comes to their marketing, when it comes to their events. So until sustainability and sustainable fashion is sort of the norm, I think these events can be really helpful in terms of championing kind of the newer brands out there who would love to kind of reach new audiences and kind of provide an alternative to those fast fashion brands. And then also, yeah, to see other events kind of evolving to include more sustainable brands, I think would also be really positive.
No, of course.
No.
While we're talking about live,
Rose, may I add something?
Yeah, please.
On the event side, both I would assume trade shows or green carpet events or fashion shows of any sort. The dilemma is, I think, that they are built on the basis of always selling more volumes, creating new trends, and anxiety as well, creating anxiety that the customer is actually wearing something that is soon out of fashion or already out of fashion. So I think there's, I mean, from a systemic perspective, there's a complete redesign of the whole event circus that needs to be taking place in order for them to have meaning. Just like you said, Sara, there has to be meaningful innovation. And these events need to become meaningful in a new way, to educate customers because they do want to learn, but also inspire customers because they do want to be inspired. But we cannot do it because it becomes fake if you're also at the same time trying to initiate new trends and pushing that we have been pushing, that has become kind of the big monster that we're talking about, the fashion industry.
But that's why, again, I kind of talk about limited edition, because limited edition is a different thing to a new trend. It's like, because it's like you're kind of giving the customer control. Like, rather than, it's not saying, if you do limited edition, it's not saying the thing that we just sold you isn't cool anymore. It's saying, actually, just buy this, and sorry, we're only making X amount, and you know, you're going to be special because you've got it, and then you're moving on to the next thing.
Yes, I completely agree, Sara. But if you think about scaling that, it could end up with the same drastic and bad effects that we have today. Just the volumes are split up in many different styles. So from a systemic perspective, I do believe that there has to be much more, I mean, change at the core. I don't know how to say it, but radical change.
And operationally, how everybody makes things has to change as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's
going to have to be change.
Our industry about critical path.
Pardon?
Can we talk a bit about critical path? Because that's where it needs to start. So, you know, if we're going to transition to carbon neutral fibers and fabrics, and to a regenerative agricultural approach to growing those fibers and creating those fabrics, there will be circular economy, you know, fishing net produced fabrics for some products. But what we need to look at the critical path, because what we've had a very quick turnaround where the buyer takes very little responsibility, the fabrics are procured by the factory, very little transparency and accountability exists in the context of where those fibers, how they're being produced and who they're being produced by, and whether those producers have earned decently. So you're looking at a critical path that probably needs to be not you know, 6 months, or you know, fast fashion is often on a 4-week turnaround, isn't it? But something that's much more aligned to what we did within sustainable and fair trade fashion at People Tree, which is about 18 months to something like 3 years when we're innovating to create a new fabric, because you need to do wearer trials. You know, when you're creating a new fabric in a woven, for example, as we did, you know, 15-18 years ago, when that didn't exist, you needed to develop it in that way. And farmers need to transition from conventionally grown cotton to organic cotton, which also takes 3 years. and with that, they need to incorporate regenerative practice within their farming. So there's a lot to be said in slowing down fashion, but also thinking about fashion. I mean, I really like the idea of the kind of the limited edition approach, but I feel that, you know, in a way, it's more thinking about it as kind of basic maths, really, which is, you know, if we bought a dress, and I'm not going to say for a moment that, you know, everyone will like a hand-woven organic cotton, hand-embroidered dress, but let's just say that that we could achieve that. And if you put a lot of innovative energy in, you would get the right kinds of drape, you would get the right kind of embellishment that was hand produced, whether that was block printed or hand embroidery, that would suit most of us. I mean, not all of us, because we all want different things, but most of us. So the question is more, how do we create the value addition, the livelihoods, the social impact in each of those production stages? And you can do that with time. And what we've got now is just a highly automated way. I mean, you know, with COVID and social distancing in factories, the Chinese suddenly said, well, let's bring in robots. Let's get robots in, because we don't have to worry about 2-meter distancing. Well, how is that going to feed, you know, the millions of garment factory workers in the global south? It just simply isn't. So we need to find a mathematical way of doing it, not just with you know, looking to AI and robots and technology to solve it. Oh, let's eradicate modern slavery by putting machines in there instead. No, what are people going to eat? You know, we've stolen the commons. People no longer have work in the rural areas because of this economic model that we in the West have pushed. I mean, we have basically exported a neo-colonialist way of doing things that has impoverished people in the global south, whether they're West African farmers or they're farmers of cotton in India. So we have to work with a more inclusive model, and that inclusive model is about, I think, pulling back to a critical path that allows for organic cotton, that allows for craft techniques. And I really do believe, I mean, it's systemic racism. We're looking at it in head offices at the moment. I know that at Tala, for example, you know, Grace Beverley has been fantastic at really championing, you know, best practice in really, you know, acknowledging the Black community for designs and for body image and all the rest of it. But I think, you know, what we need is a bit of a shift. We need that kind of modern outlook, that kind of calling of history, and then to bring that back into the kinds of critical paths that will enable sustainable fashion to be truly one that promotes human rights, because at the moment it's an utter sham.
Yeah, no, of course. Lovely. I'm just looking at the time, and some really, really fantastic things have been mentioned already. I want to bring back to that previous point we spoke about earlier about lifestyle and accessibility as well. And I want to touch on money and affordability. And Amy, I have a question for you. You've quite literally wrote a book about ways that people can live an eco-friendly life, and that touches upon fashion as well. So if you are an individual and you cannot afford, let's say, brands like, well, I was going to say Reformation, or maybe even kind of like higher end, sustainable, ethical fashion items, what are some other kind of ways that people can get involved in ethical or zero waste or sustainable fashion? How can they go about that?
Yeah, I think we've got so many clothes in our wardrobe, and it's opening up your wardrobe and looking at what you've got already. And then if it's no longer something that you might not want to wear, it might be a maxi dress. Well, get creative, take it out, pull it apart and make it into maybe a shorter dress. So get creative with the things that you already have. And then you may not have teamed, I don't know, a top with a pair of trousers 2 years ago, but suddenly the pair of trousers, you're thinking, hey, these might look good together now. And making a new way of channeling your own style through what you wear, through what you've already got in your wardrobe. And yeah, I think I've experienced it as well, working in press departments or fashion styling, where I look at my wardrobe and I think, people are going to say, oh, she's not got the most fashionable outfit on anymore, because that's not the path that I wanted to take anymore. So it was a way of saying, okay, take what I've already got and make something look fashionable with that. For example, my mum's top from maybe 30 or 40 years ago, which she wouldn't wear again, but I think, yeah, it's great. I teamed it with a pair of trousers for myself, and yeah, off I go. But also it comes to like secondhand as well. Secondhand shopping and shopping with your friends. I think obviously at the moment we can't meet up with our friends, but this is great to get online and say, hey, this is my wardrobe that I don't want anymore. Why don't you show me your wardrobe that you don't want anymore? And then we do a swap. And I think that's really important with children as well. Children grow out of their clothes so quickly, and it's becoming friends with people who have got children who are slightly older, and you can just do clothes swaps as well with them. And then also charity shops, secondhand and vintage shops as well, and embracing that. However, I understand that by the economy needs to work, people need to buy, and that's why I'm so involved with Sara's suggestion of like Kitchery throughout the COVID, they did that limited edition collections to reduce the waste. So if you're not going to shop secondhand or what you've already got, looking at those innovations, like wine waste, for example, mushrooms, pineapple leaves, those innovative textiles which reduce our waste that we've already created through different industries.
That's really interesting. I've never heard about the pineapple.
Oh, it's really nice.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any kind of anything to add to that point of how people can get involved with sustainable fashion if they're not able to buy more pricier items?
Yeah, I think that this is kind of the psychology of how we shop. It kind of comes back to these. We've been pushed all these trends upon us. So we've been like buying because we think we need to fit in or look cool, rather than looking at actually what suits our body shape. And this is the most amazing beginning part of the journey, because yes, sustainable fashion can be more expensive, but if you buy less, you can afford it. And how do you buy less? You don't need that much clothes in your wardrobe. We wear something crazy like 10% of what we have, something like that. And why do we wear 10% of what we have? Because it doesn't suit us and we don't feel great in it. So my recommendation is, the beginning part of the journey is I suggest to everybody to go and look what suits them, what makes them feel good, try on everything in their wardrobe, and then they can buy things from that point of what suits their body shape rather than trend. And then you can afford more sustainable pieces because you don't need as many pieces in your wardrobe.
Ava?
Can I add to that? And I completely agree. We did an end user survey actually of one of our, we've been around for 30 years, but a style that we've had in our line for almost 20 years. And we did an end customer survey just through social media to learn how it's being used. Because, Ellen MacArthur Foundation gave out some data on the average use in the Western world, and it's crazy numbers, but a garment is worn 7 or 10 times before it's discarded. And just by designing products according to exactly what we envision in a product, and not stopping because there's a deadline, but rather just going for it without compromise until we have that product in place. That makes a product that people just not only fall in love with, but stay in love with, and they keep it. So the data we have now is more than 1,000 times of use, more than 10 years, several times a week. So it becomes a product that they say they are addicted to, in a good sense, we hope. But anyways, there's so many opportunities today with the materials that we have and the handicraft and everything else that we have in place. It's just that we've lost track of all the wisdom that's been built up throughout the years, and we can just as easily go back to that, and the customers are ready for it. It's just a matter of shifting, the big corporate machines, I would say, in another direction. But it's possible, and customers do use it. And if you if you then look at value for a product instead of just price, you realize that there's quite high value for something you wear so many times. And the other thing I would like to add is we started out with rental and subscription services in 2012. And for people who don't wear a product like that several times a week for several years, but rather a ski jacket or whatever that you just wear one week per year, you might as well rent it. So that type of business model is interesting, both for the industry, for the environment, and for the customer, of course. So there's so many different options if we just become creative and question what we're doing today.
That's wonderful. Yes. I've been seeing more and more of these rental services, and I'm seeing all the influencers kind of going, oh, hey, I'm using this rental service to get this dress. That is one thing that I think is just, when you think about it, you're like, yes, that's an absolute perfect idea. Why would I? Of course, I only need this item for a certain season, weather season, not fashion season. So when we talk about affordability, Sara, I'd really like to ask, is this something that Thaler has brought into mind? Because obviously your range is highly price-wise, very competitive. If you look at how much Nike is charging for their athleisure, and then you look at the prices of Thaler, has affordability always been part of your journey or part of your mission as a brand?
Yes, it was essentially one of the kind of key pillars that Grace Beverley, our founder, conceptualized Thaler for. She was obviously very heavily involved in the fitness industry, was partnering with a lot of activewear brands. And the kind of like fast fashion nature of them and the non-ethical production practices, and it just didn't sit well with her at all. So she kind of wanted to develop a brand that was built on making sustainable clothing more accessible. So ensuring it was at a price point that her kind of social media audience could afford, that could kind of try and move people over from those kind of high street fast fashion activewear brands and kind of educate people about why sustainable fashion is more important and provide them with an alternative that they could afford. So yeah, very much something, it's a conversation we have every day about whether we can sell something at an RRP that is going to be accessible while still having those sustainable values that the entire brand is built on. So yeah, very much kind of a part of our core value. And as part of that, there are sacrifices that we have to make as a brand because we don't have the margins that the fast fashion brands have. So that therefore impacts on what our marketing spend can be and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a compromise that we make, but it's something that obviously is so important to us and that we don't want to have to change. We want to be that kind of sustainable, accessible brand. So we'll kind of take the hit on the margins from our side in order to achieve that.
So actually just bringing into the conversation about Boohoo, these kind of brands that recently have experienced lots of backlash, obviously for the really questionable, actually not even questionable because it's just downright just wrong in terms of people and the planet. I want to talk about fast fashion in terms of greenwashing, and we'll touch on this like quite quickly, but Ava, I'd like to ask you, so we're seeing more brands like ASOS and H&M, for example, releasing, their conscious lines, or ASOS have had their circular collection. I'm curious to know what you think. Do you think these brands are greenwashing, or do you think they are in fact trying to actually change their ways?
I do believe that they actually aim to change their ways, but I don't think they realize how radical they need to be, and I don't think they realize how radical I think they can be and still have huge opportunities by doing so. I mean, there's potentially an exponential change in customer behavior now, so I don't think anybody can even imagine what the customer will expect of each of us in only a couple of years. So with those big corporate machines, I think they're moving way too slow. They're doing fantastic stuff, usually on the side. So instead of transforming their entire business, they're transforming a small part or working on something at the side. But I must also say that at least I'm more aware of what H&M is doing, and they, I think, were part of at least financing the pineapple fabric. So they're doing things for innovation. But what I see is lacking throughout the industry is when there's innovation, to actually apply those new sustainable technologies across the board rather than just adding it as a spice. And I don't believe customers will even believe that it's genuine if they don't do it across the board soon. So in one sense, yes, they're doing a fantastic job and it's sincere, but on the other hand, I don't think they are working hard enough. Like back to what you said, Sara, you cannot be lazy. You have to work hard, and you have to have a knowledge base, a systemic perspective, and just go without compromise now if you don't want to lag behind and end up not being relevant.
Definitely.
And also, of course, they have a responsibility to change much faster because their impact is, of course, huge. Maybe, can I add one thing?
Yes, of course.
And I guess we've talked about it here, but usually there's a lot of focus on production and material sourcing. And of course, that's really important. I mean, we started moving towards circular in 2001, and almost 80% or more than 80% of our styles are now circular, meaning they're made from recycled and can have a continuous life in terms of resource. But it's not enough. We also have to look at volumes, like we touched upon earlier. I mean, it won't help if we do sustainable styles or fabrics or whatever if we keep on pushing volumes like we are today. And we also, as lifestyle brands, we have so much power in changing customer behavior and aspirational lifestyles. And I don't see that happening for many of the big brands. They still are pushing people to shop like crazy.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, that is a massive issue and a huge shift that the whole industry needs to make. Safia, I saw that you raised your hand.
I did, yeah. I think it was Kate Fletcher and her partner's Earth Logic approach that looked at a reduction of consumption and production by 70% is what we need to see in a very, very short space of time. And so what that does mean is, as you quite rightly say, Eva, it's about taking the fibres and fabrics that we already have in the system and creating new fabrics from them, but also when we're producing new, making sure that we deliver the best social impact to promote social justice that we possibly can in that process. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a massive shift, isn't it? We've got Patagonia and a few fashion brands now talking about net zero by 2030. The mainstream business community have shifted to net zero by 2050, realizing that that's way too late, and they're shifting now to 2040, with a lot of businesses talking about 2035. Business declares a climate, ecological and social emergency, the organization that we set up last year in March, April. Many business people like me were in the streets with Extinction Rebellion and the school strikers. Really, it is that massive transition to a regenerative economy. I mean, I'd love to pick up on that point about brands, because I do feel you're right. There's been a lot of greenwash, but they're also, I mean, we have to call it for what it is. I mean, we have all been trapped, even fashion stylists and fashion journalists have been trapped in this kind of, splurge or spree, all this kind of bullshit complicity around, a system that is totally unsustainable and built on slavery. So, it is kind of coming back to just, it hurts to understand that we've been duped, that the capitalist system that, does give us a few baubles, of course, and all the rest of it, is deeply flawed. And fashion companies, some have been doing a huge job to really readdress how different governments that have huge garment sectors within them, look at their recruitment practices. I know that ASOS did a really interesting piece of work with Mauritius to look at how how recruiters bring people in from India, often on a basis where a worker is trapped in a bonded labour arrangement for years. And so, there's lots of work going on behind the scenes, which is about really addressing how incredibly dysfunctional our economic system is. How do we allow that? I mean, I'm sure we've all kind of whether you were 17 or 27 or 37 when you realize you just kind of, but why have we got a system that is so utterly dysfunctional? We thought that international laws were there to be upheld. Who are they upheld by? No one. They're not upheld by our first world governments, nor are they upheld by our global south governments. I mean, it is just shocking. So I do think it's really recognizing all of the different stakeholders' parts in this, whether they're businesses, consumers, the media, local government, national government, international institutions. We've got a really, really big thing to call, haven't we?
It's massive. It's going to be absolutely massive.
I say, but we can all now do our part, because you're totally right, Safia. All this has been happening, and it's been unconscious. That's the big thing. It's all been unconscious. So we're all been working in our industries. We haven't known it, then we felt it. And, I'm sure lots of the brands and everybody wants to do the best. And the thing is, the companies have to change because the consumers already changed, many of the consumers, and that's increasing day by day. So the opportunity I see for everybody watching this is conscious consumerism, and everybody doing their part to look at how they can be more meaningful, more real, and more innovative.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that is actually a fantastic part to finish on. My last question for all of you, and I will go to you individually or whenever it pops up into your head. If you could describe what the future of our fashion industry looks like, how would you describe it in one line?
I already did.
Basma, I'll go for you. Yes. Sorry, you've already done it.
Sara, go.
Direct to consumer, digital, meaningful, real, and limited edition.
You just took all the words.
We probably all have similar answers, but Basma, have you got anything else?
I think for me, it's just about being purpose-led. I think we live, especially in 2020, I think we all live in a very, very purpose-led society. So I think if we can keep leading with purpose, I think the brands have to follow.
Definitely. And Eva, how would you describe the future of our
fashion?
fashion?
I agree with what you said, but I really do think that there's every system we design, we can also redesign. So there's high hopes from my side in terms of transforming ourselves and the industry and the rest of society with it. But I think that beauty is, for me, the most important thing, and beauty is much more than the aesthetical part. And in 5 years' time, I think that I hope that customers, when they go out shopping, what they find is beauty throughout and within every product, that there's no bad stuff out there anymore. I mean, we as brands need to take that responsibility and just get rid of the stuff that we shouldn't be selling. And how beautiful wouldn't that be?
That'd be wonderful. Sara, what do you think the industry looks like in the future?
I had less is more. So using what you've already got, again, as Amy was saying, kind of revisiting your wardrobe and how you can layer up, try it with new styles. And then when you are making choices in regards to what you're going to shop, make sure that those are conscious choices. So doing your research, shopping from sustainable brands, and making sure that you know where those products have come from. You know what their supply chain is, where their workers are, that they're paid a living wage. So yeah, less is more.
Less is more, lovely. And then what about you, Amy?
Yeah, I think following on to that, I think your next product has already been made, it's already been worn and loved. And if not, it's already a product from the byproduct industry of another product, and it's already waiting for you.
That's wonderful. And Safia, what do you think?
I think it's systems change, not climate change. It's slow, it's less, it's net zero, ideally by 2030, for God's sakes. It's craft and it's value addition, livelihoods.
That is so wonderful. So I just want to thank absolutely every single one of you. This has been so informative, and I hope you at home have enjoyed this discussion. You can catch all of our panelists and more content at its time if you just check our schedule. But please be sure to share this with any friends of yours who you think are just trying to make decisions as to how they become more sustainable with their wardrobe, or if you know anyone who owns a fashion brand or is part of the fashion industry, please, please, please share this with them. I've been Rose. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your contribution today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.